Bonjour, I am Jennifer, your French teacher in the south of France, and in this lesson, I'll show you when you have to use the helping verb êTRE in the French passé composé. There's only a fairly small list of situations when you need to use êTRE instead of avoir, but they're super important, so stick around, and at the end of the lesson, I'll give you a quiz. Now, all you need to do is follow the links in the video description below to see this lesson on my blog, for more French resources, and to find out how you can become my patron on Patreon. All right, many intransitive verbs take êTRE as a helping verb, but if you're not a grammar teacher or just really into grammar, you may not know what that means. Intransitive verbs are not followed by a direct object. Okay, so if that's still just about as clear as mud, don't worry, I'll explain everything you need to know, and I'm going to try to keep it really simple for you. Many of these verbs that we're going to talk about today also indicate motion. They're verbs of coming and going. But don't make the mistake of thinking that you can just think of verbs of motion to use êTRE, because that's not true. You have plenty of verbs that involve motion that do not use êTRE. What you really have to do is look at what comes after the verb to understand why it uses êTRE and not avoir. So let's have a look at this example. I am entering the cafe. What am I entering? The cafe. The cafe answers the question what, so that is a direct object in English, okay? However, in French, we say j'entre dans le café. And you can see that there's a preposition of place before le café that we don't have in English. Most verbs that I'm going to show you today can be followed by prepositions of place like à, en, dans, chez, etc. We'll see a lot of Disney examples that I'm going to show you. Some other common prepositions that we'll see are avec, which means with, pour means for, and de, which can mean a couple different things. You'll see in a few minutes. All right, so here is the basic list of verbs that use êTRE as helping verb. Have a close look at this list before I show you the rest. Now, can you see how these verbs are verbs of coming and going? Repeat them after me. Devenir, revenir, monter, rester, sortir, partir, venir, arriver, naître. Okay? Naître means to be born, but you can think of that as if you're coming into being, and then it's still a verb of coming and going, right? Now, here's the rest of the list. Still verbs of coming and going. Répétez après moi. Descendre, entrer, rentrer, tomber, retourner, aller, mourir, passer. And this time we have the verb mourir, which means to die, or to go away from this life, if you want to think of it that way. A lot of people find it useful in the beginning to memorize this list of verbs. There are 17 of them, and you can download your copy of the list on my blog. The first letter of all the verbs can be arranged to spell out the words Dr., Mrs., P., Vandertramp, and you may find that helpful. That can really help you, for example, if you're studying for a quiz or something. But in the long run, the best way to get used to using êTRE as helping verb is to use these verbs frequently when speaking French. Eventually, you won't have to think about it so much anymore. Let's just take a moment to review the verb êTRE. Répétez après moi. Je suis, tu es, il est, on est, elle est. I got those a little mixed up, didn't I? Il est, elle est, on est. Okay? Nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. Now we use the verb être instead of avoir with the verbs on the list I just showed you. For example, je suis rentré chez moi. You should not try to do a direct translation to English when using être as helping verb. That sort of works sometimes when you're using avoir as helping verb, but not with être. Je suis rentré chez moi just means I went home. I want to point out a few things to you. First of all, you see that the E is in parentheses. I put that there because I wanted to show you that if je is feminine, you have to make that past participle, which is the past tense form of rentré, you have to make it agree with the feminine subject by adding an E to it. That's a thing. When you have être as helping verb, you always have to do that. If you know that the je is masculine, you don't have to put the E in parentheses when you're writing. I'm just pointing that out because I've had a lot of students ask me that question. Another thing to notice is that word chez. Chez is a preposition of location. Now remember, I told you that many times these verbs are followed by prepositions of location. Let's look at some more examples. Here's one with tu. Again, I've put an E in parentheses because if tu is feminine, I have to make agreement on the past participle. Tu es parti de la maison. Tu es parti de la maison. You left the house. Here we have the preposition de after the verb because in French, you can't just say that you left the house like we do in English. You have to say that you left from the house. That's why the de is there. And that's why we use être and not avoir. Those prepositions are super, super important to remember. Il est sorti de sa voiture. Il est sorti de sa voiture. No agreement is possible here since we know that il is masculine and singular. But notice the preposition de again. That corresponds to the English word of, but remember that de can mean different things and sometimes you need it in French when you don't need it in English. Elle est allée au cinéma. Elle est allée au cinéma. She went to the cinema. I have to add an E to aller because elle is a feminine subject and the preposition that comes after it is au. Remember that au, au, is the contraction that is formed when you have a and le next to each other. Nous sommes retournés aux États-Unis. Nous sommes retournés aux États-Unis. We went back to the United States. You may need an E to make agreement if nous is an all-feminine group. You definitely need to put an S on the past participle because nous is always plural no matter what. Aux États-Unis. Sometimes that's hard to pronounce, so repeat it after me. Aux États-Unis. Good. Now remember that au, A-U-X, is just a plus le. It's a contraction. Vous êtes tombé dans la rue. Vous êtes tombé dans la rue. You fell down in the street. You may need to add an E. You may need to add an S. Remember that vous can be singular or plural, and it can be feminine or masculine. It all depends upon the context. Dans la rue. Dans is another preposition of location. Ils sont arrivés en retard. Ils sont arrivés en retard. Here we need an S to make agreement since il is plural. And here's another situation where we need a preposition in French but not in English. The preposition en has to come before retard. Elles sont revenues avec leurs amis. Elles sont revenues avec leurs amis. They came back with their friends. Elles, here we have a plural and feminine subject, so we have to add an E and an S to revenu. And notice the preposition that follows the verb, avec. Avec means with. Okay, before we move on, I should tell you that reflexive verbs also use êtres in the passé composé. I'm not going to go into that on this lesson, but I do have another lesson on it, so I'll put that link at the end of the video for you. Okay, so now I'm getting ready to give you a quiz, but first let's review the verb être. Répétez après moi. Je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, on est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. Très bien. I also want to show you the past participles of the 17 Dr. and Mrs. P. Vandertramp verbs. Most of them follow the regular rules of forming past participles, but some may throw you for a loop since they're irregular, and I've written those in all caps. So let's just go over the past participles. Repeat them after me. Devenu, rentré, monté, resté, sorti, parti, venu, arrivé, né, descendu, entré, revenu, tombé, retourné, aller, mort, passé. Très bien. Okay, are you ready for a quiz? Here we go. I'm going to give you some sentences in the present tense, and I'll ask you to put them in the passé composé. D'accord? So the first thing you need to do is look at the verb. For example, in this first one, je vais au supermarché. And first you have to identify that verb. What verb is that? And then put it into the passé composé. So I'll go through these fairly quickly. If you need time to think, then just put the video on pause as needed. Okay, je vais au supermarché. In the passé composé, je suis allée au supermarché. Bravo, très bien. Now, if you're a girl or a woman, then you need to add an E to the past participle to make agreement. D'accord? Je suis allée au supermarché. I went to the supermarket. Allez, let's do another one. Tu pars pour le travail. Tu pars pour le travail. Au passé composé, tu es parti pour le travail. Tu es parti pour le travail. Add an E if tu happens to be feminine. And what does that mean? It means you left for work. Bien. Il revient de l'école. Il revient de l'école. Au passé composé, il est revenu de l'école. Il est revenu de l'école. Bravo. Très bien. What does it mean? Remember, revenu means, revenir means to come back. So he came back from school. Super. Allez, elle sort avec ses parents. Elle sort avec ses parents. Et au passé composé, elle est sortie avec ses parents. Elle est sortie avec ses parents. Here we had to put an E. I hope you remembered that. Add an E to sortie because elle is a singular and feminine subject. She went out with her parents. Nous descendons de la montagne. Nous descendons de la montagne. Voilà. Au passé composé, nous sommes descendus de la montagne. Nous sommes descendus de la montagne. Très bien. You might need an E in there if nous is an all-feminine group. We came down from the mountain. What it kind of means is we came down from the mountain top. D'accord? Allez. Vous arrivez en avance. Vous arrivez en avance au passé composé. get it up here. Vous êtes arrivé en avance. Vous êtes arrivé en avance. Okay, here, just depending on who vous is referring to, you might need an E and you might need an S, right? Okay, we're almost done now. Il rentre à minuit. Il rentre à minuit. Au passé composé, ils sont rentrés à minuit. Forgot an accent mark there. Did you see it? Okay, just pretend like it's there. Ils sont rentrés should have an accent aigu over the first, rather the second E in rentré. Okay? Ils sont rentrés à minuit. Et enfin, elles entrent dans la maison. Elles entrent dans la maison. Au passé composé, elles sont entrées dans la maison. Elles sont entrées dans la maison. I had to add an extra E and an S to that past participle because of my feminine and plural subject. And remember, in French, they went in the house, in English rather, they went in the house, but in French, they went dans la maison. D'accord? Dans la maison. So that's another preposition of location. Voilà. Très bien. Alors, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, whether you're teaching yourself French or learning at school and need a little extra help. I do try to put out new videos every single week. Also, check the links in the video description below to see all of the ways that you can connect with and support Love Learning Languages. À très bientôt et au revoir.